Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Hi, everyone. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Welcome to our eLotus webinar today. My name is Donna Chow, and I will be your host and your moderator for today's class. For over 2 decades, eLotus has been your trusted source for TCM continuing education for acupuncturists. We offer the largest selection of online CEU courses with over 3,000 CE hours. And if you are new to eLotus, remember to sign up today for an eLotus account to receive a free 1 CEU course as a welcome gift. This offer is valid for new accounts only. Let's cover a few housekeeping before we get started today. If you're a big fan of learning new acupuncture points, visit eLotus Core, our ultimate free resource guide of Master Tung's acupuncture. Here, you'll be able to see needling demos, learn point locations, indications, and much more. Plus, you can also look up traditional points on our eLotus Core website. Just like the Master Tung's acupuncture, you can learn locations and indications of traditional points. If you're a big fan of Master Tung's acupuncture, this weekend, we will be hosting a 2-day webinar on Master Tung's with Dr. Henry McCann on Neijing and Nanjing treatment strategies in Tung's acupuncture and mental and emotional health in Tung's acupuncture. These courses are approved for a total of 16 CEUs if you attend both Saturday and Sunday. We hope to see you there. Okay, let's get started with today's class with a quick introduction of Dr. Henry McCann. Henry is the author of Pricking the Vessels, Bloodletting Therapy in Chinese Medicine, and the co-author with Dr. Hans George Ross of Practical Atlas of Tung's Acupuncture. He is a faculty member at the Pacific College of Health and Science in New York, where he teaches medical classics. He also teaches for the doctoral degree programs at the Oregon College of Oriental Medicine, along with other doctoral degrees across the United States. Today's webinar is Intro to Neijing and Nanjing Treatment Strategies and Mental Health in Tung's Acupuncture. And just a reminder, before we get started with today's webinar, let's keep today's class discussion on Master Tung's acupuncture only. There will be no discussions regarding COVID or vaccinations in today's webinar. Thank you so much for understanding. And Henry, you can go ahead and take control of the webinar room now.
Okay, I think that I'm good and live. Someone could just let me know in the chat room if you can hear me clearly. Good. All right. So there we go. So welcome everyone. I appreciate everyone participating today. Lotus, why don't I go ahead and mute you, or you guys can mute yourselves so we don't have any other background sound. So, okay, I can't do that. Anyway, so if we have questions, feel free to type them in the chat room. I'll do the best I can to try to pay attention to what's going on in the chat room, although I may not necessarily see a question that comes up. There's quite a lot of people online today. So I'll be sure to leave some time at the end of the class to ask questions. So hopefully we'll have enough time to get through everything. I'm not particularly worried about it. So as an introduction, what we're going to do today is just go through a couple of short case studies, just 2 short case studies, and use them as jumping off points for a discussion of 2 topics that I find particularly interesting. One is the Neijing and Nanjing treatment strategies in Tung's acupuncture, and the other is mental health in Tung's acupuncture. And I'll bring the PowerPoint, the presentation up shortly. I'll just give you a little background of where some of the ideas for this came from. First of all, the Neijing and Nanjing treatment strategies. Unfortunately, this one starts with a I was on Facebook one day story, because it's how I seem to get myself riled up quite easily. So I try to engage on Facebook as little as possible. Most of you notice that I'm not really in any, I try to stay out of most forums, but there is this, I don't remember exactly how it started, but it was a discussion with a TCM practitioner who I only know on Facebook. And they were talking about something related to the Neijing or Nanjing. And I brought up something related to Master Dong's acupuncture. And the response was basically, well, there's no Master Dong in the Neijing or the Nanjing. And I thought to myself, well, it's true, right? No, neither the Neijing or the Nanjing. And if you don't know what those books are, we'll be talking about them on this weekend sometime, and giving a really basic, very quick introduction of what the books are, the basic contents, etc. But certainly Dong's points and Master Dong's name is not mentioned in either of those books. However, if we say we practice Chinese medicine, right, and if we believe that there are such things as yin yang, 5 phases, channel systems, Zangfu, etc., and it's not just this sort of fanciful theory that these old people who didn't know anything came up with, certainly I don't think that's the case. If these theories really play a part in what we do in our medicine, then the central resources that we have are first and foremost the Neijing, the inner classic, and then by extension, other related texts such as the Classic of Difficulties. So even though there's no Dong listed specifically in the Neijing or the Nanjing, clearly the Neijing and Nanjing are within Dong's acupuncture, right? And I do believe if you want to practice Dong's acupuncture at a better level or a deeper level, or any acupuncture, and it's like, I'm known as a Dong's acupuncture teacher, but I honestly don't believe, and I know this may be heresy, I don't really believe there's such a thing as Dong's acupuncture, Chinese acupuncture, Korean acupuncture, etc. All the different systems of acupuncture are merely different algorithms of how we think we can best apply core principles as found in the early classical medical literature, including in particular the Neijing and the Nanjing. So we'll talk about that. And we're just going to barely scratch the surface of the topic, really, over this weekend. So even though there's no Dong in the Neijing or Nanjing, the Neijing and Nanjing are deeply found in Dong's system. Why? Because it's a system of Chinese medicine. Okay, that's the first piece. The second topic is mental health and Dong's acupuncture. So, I am not a specialist. I don't say that I'm not a therapist, right? Although in my clinic, the joke is I'm not a therapist, but I play one on TV, because my suspicion is you all who are in practice, and there are almost 100 of you online right now, you all deal with the same sort of patients that I deal with. And we're living in a time, and I have to say, I don't think it's unique to our time. I think it's been the human condition from the very beginning. Life is stressful. People come in with complaints of anxiety, depression, whatever it happens to be, and it's an important and significant part of their presentation, because it's an important, significant part of their life. Life is not necessarily easy on a psycho-emotional, spiritual level for people to get through. And even if you're not a psychotherapist, I don't know if anyone on here is a psychotherapist, but even if you're not, this is an aspect of the human experience that we all have to deal with in our patient population. And so it's something that's very important. And another thing that I hear, this one was not necessarily on Facebook, but this is something I hear all the time. Oh yeah, Dong's acupuncture, that's for pain management, right? They do that distal needle stuff is good for pain management. And what else? I mean, it can't be good for other stuff, right? Or the other thing I hear is, oh, if you want to do pain management or internal medicine, you do this. And if you want to do psycho-emotional treatment, you have to do this kind of acupuncture. And I will tell you that if you believe that, then you're not practicing Chinese medicine the way that you could potentially. Every systems approach to Chinese medicine equally treats as well pain, internal medicine, psycho-emotional conditions, whatever. Why? Because Chinese medicine is a way of treating human beings, right? Or if you're a veterinarian, animals, right? And they still deal with psycho-emotional issues as well. If you practice your medicine deeply, you should be able to apply it in the treatment of a variety of different conditions, right? And if you believe only one system is best at treating XYZ, then you're not using your own system to its maximum advantage. Okay, that's the preamble to everything that's going to come next. Okay, let's get into the presentation. Okay, here we go. So we'll start with this first case study And these are both recent case studies from my clinic. They've been modified slightly, so the ages are not exactly right, and some of the details are slightly different, just to protect patient privacy. But you'll get the basic idea. And these are actually patients that I'm dealing with right now that we're treating, and I think treating well. So this first case is, and again, like most of my patients, very few patients have just one thing that they're dealing with, right? So this is a patient who is, main complaint is atrial fibrillation. But she's also dealing with a recent loss of a very close loved one. So this is a 60-ish-year-old female. The main complaint is atrial fibrillation, so she has palpitations. She complains of significant fatigue, this uncomfortable feeling in the chest. So it's not pain per se, but she just feels generally unwell. And this was pre-existing to some extent, the loss of the close loved one. Now, I will say though that a combination of acupuncture, and I had her on an herbal medicine, an herbal formula as well. These were generally able to keep the atrial fibrillation complaints at bay. She was at this point being monitored by her cardiologist, so she wasn't doing any conventional treatment yet. But she was, after some treatment, I started seeing her for this specific complaint. She's been a patient of mine for a long time. But after the specific complaint, we started treating her maybe in August or September of this year. And everything was actually fairly well controlled. There was then this loss of the close loved one, which re-triggered the symptoms that she was dealing with before, in addition to processing these feelings of loss and grief. So that's sort of the main picture that we're looking at. Hold on, before I forget, I'm going to put my phone on silent so no one bothers us. All right, so that's the main presentation. The pulse was thin and choppy, and the right sun positions if there's audio issues, make sure you let me know now so that we can address them. Otherwise, maybe our tech people at eLotus can deal with it. Okay, so I'll continue until someone tells me that we need to fix something. The pulse was thin and choppy, and the right sun position was weak. So the right sun position, of course, goes with lung, right? So this is the right sun position. So overall, the patient was, we see thin and choppy. There's stagnation in the case. There's an overall vacuity. So without having to without coming up with a very specific TCM style diagnosis right now, we know we have to deal with heart, we know we have to deal with lung, we know we have to deal with overall qi and blood insufficiency and stasis within the system. So clearly, all sorts of conditions, including conditions related to mind and affect, are discussed within the medical literature, right? So here in the next slide, this is some chapter summaries of different statements. So the first one, so these are, I've broken them down by Zhang organ. These are excerpts from different chapters. This first one is from the 22nd chapter of the Suen. Suen 22 is the treatise on Zhang Qi following the patterns of the seasons. The middle one is the Suen 74, and these are excerpts from the 19 Lines in Pathology. And the last one is from the 16th difficulty. So the 16th difficulty comes from the Nanjing. The first two columns are from the Neijing, and the third column here is from the Nanjing. So we can see all sorts of physiological symptoms here in particular. Heart, we have all these things that we could fall under the category of atrial fibrillation. So clearly we're in heart realm. Chest pain, pain and congestion in the ribs, pain below the ribs, pain in the breast, back, shoulders, this whole area of the chest, et cetera, et cetera. But if we go over to the 16th difficult issue, we'll see that each of the clauses for the 5 Zhang organs have a, oops, sorry, jumped ahead, have a description of some sort of affect pattern. So under lung, we see it says grief without joy, right? Under heart, we have tendency to laughing. Under spleen, we have overthinking, literally fondness of thinking, right? So this overthinking, this rumination, that's spleen territory. Liver, we have irascibility, tendency towards anger, right? It's also a neat and tidy appearance. I like that description, right? So liver people are, you know, they have everything. The chi is well ordered. Sometimes the chi can be completely disordered. Those are both liver presentations. Okay. And for kidney, we have fearfulness. That's the association with kidney, which again is fairly straightforward. We'll come back to some of these different ideas a little bit later. So we can see that within this case, we have symptoms that both relate to heart, as well as symptoms that relate to lung. So we definitely have both territories at play here. Let's go to the next one. So this is the point prescription. For those of you who are not quite as familiar with Dong's acupuncture, you may later on need to go back and look up some of these points. But for those of you who are more familiar, this should seem fairly straightforward. And we'll do a brief discussion of some of this as well. So this is a typical point prescription. So these will vary slightly based on exactly what's happening when she's in the clinic, what her pulse feels like. But these are points that are chosen, at least I would say 80% of the time. This is a typical point prescription. We have Tongguan and Tongshan. These are part of the Zusantong, the leg 3 penetrations. 8801, 8802. These points are found on the thigh. I'll bring up a diagram of these points shortly. Neiguan, pericardium 6. Pericardium 6 has the ability to sort of open the chest as a regulatory effect on the blood vessels and can treat things like chest tightness, palpitations, etc. The upper 4 flowers, the Sihua Shang, the upper 4 flowers, this is in the same location as 3 miles, stomach 36, which we'll talk about the role this plays as well. And then typically we will add in other points. To these are the sort of main groups of points. Other points include Huoying and Huoju. This is Fire Hard and Fire Master, which are overlapping liver 2 and liver 3. And Ren Huang, which is the Human Emperor, which overlaps the 3 yin meeting spleen 6. Okay, this is sort of a typical point prescription. So let's break this down just a bit. So first thing I'm going to point out is that in Dong's acupuncture, there are various different methods of point selection. And one of the things that we can do when we're looking at how do we how we choose points, there are 4 main point selection methods that I've talked about in previous classes. And this idea is based on the writing of some Taiwanese authors that I've sort of adapted to some extent. It's just a way for me to organize my thinking. One of the ways of point selection that we can do is point selection based on the typical sort of imaging and mirroring concepts that we talk about frequently within Dong's acupuncture, within balance method, and other similar types of distal point acupuncture systems, or distant point. I prefer to use the word distant point only because distal is a specific anatomical direction. Distant just means away from the site of disease. So for example, most of you who've practiced Dong's acupuncture or balance method or similar systems are familiar with this idea that the hand goes to the head, the wrist goes to the neck, the forearm goes to the chest, elbow goes to the navel, etc. Right? Same thing on the lower extremities. So the foot goes to the head, ankle goes to the neck, knee goes to the navel, etc. So this type of point selection is useful in particular for things like pain management. So for example, if we have a problem of the headache, we know we can choose, for example, a point on the hand or the foot, right? Let's say we have low back pain at the level of the lumbar. So the lumbar area, we can go to points like bladder 40, right? Bladder 40, because the back of the knee area tracks to the lumbar region, the level of the navel, okay? Likewise, you can use lung 5. If you didn't realize, low back pain is a traditional TCM indication for lung 5, which goes to show you that these ideas of how do we connect different parts of the body are deeply embedded in Chinese medicine, not only within Dong or balance method or other similar systems, right? So if you open up Deadman's Book of Points, you'll see low back pain indicated for lung 5. That's because lung 5 at the level of the elbow tracks to the lower back, right? So this is one method of point selection that we use in Dong's acupuncture, and we use it quite frequently. Now, there's another method that that I like to talk about, and I'm not the only Dong teacher, certainly. There are many better teachers than me talking about this same method. That's also important that I think sometimes we forget when we focus on the sort of balanced method-like approach to Dong's acupuncture, which is valid, important, useful, but not the only way we can apply this system. This is this method of choosing a point group, which are called Daoma point groups. And we'll talk about what Daoma, for those of you who are familiar with Daoma needling, it's an essential part of Dong's acupuncture. We'll be talking more about it extensively over the weekend. And as a little sneak preview, I'm going to be talking about, and this comes from the Taiwanese literature, we're going to be talking about the relationships between Madanyang's heavenly star points and Daoma needling, because there's an interesting relationship, and that will be, I think this Saturday we'll have that discussion. So Daoma is a method of needle selection that looks at choosing a small group of points in a region of the body that has a specific stimulus on an area of the body, an organ, etc. So within Dong's acupuncture, there are point groups that function as main regulators of the Zang Fu, right? And in particular in Dong's acupuncture, these points are found on the legs, especially in zones 7 and 8, which is the area between, zone 7 is between the ankle and the knee, zone 8 is between the knee and the trunk, right? So these point groups are used mainly for global regulation of really the 5 Zang organs. And there's one group, there's actually 2 groups for kidney, but otherwise there's one group for each of the major Zang organs that are thought to have a broad regulatory effect. So this group here falls into this needle method. This is the leg 3 penetrations. It's comprised of 88.01, 02, and 03. And so this is Tongguan, penetrate the gate, Tongshan, penetrate the or connected mountain, and Tongtian, penetrate or connecting to heaven. This 3-point group on the anterior thigh is the main Daoma group for regulation of heart. Okay. We have lots of different ways we can get into heart. One of the channel connections to keep in the back of your head is that these points are functionally most closely related to the stomach channel. So the stomach channel, remember, is the leg Yang Ming, which has a connection through the branching connection of the 5 Zang to the arm Jue Yin, right? So we connect, remember, Taiyang goes to Taiyin, Xiaoyang goes to Xiaoyin, and Yangming goes to Jue Yin. So remember, in Dong's acupuncture, it's very important to remember that when we're treating heart, especially cardiac heart, this is mediated through the pericardium Jue Yin, which is perhaps a little clue that Dong's acupuncture is kind of old. Remember, in very ancient times, even pre-Neijing times, we're looking at originally an 11-channel model with the 5 Zang each getting 1 channel, and then we have the 6 Fu, right? Before there were 12 channels, there were 11 channels. And the channel that was not there was the modern day heart channel. So the heart channel that was thought to be the heart channel in ancient times was what we today call the pericardium channel, which is why in the Ling Shu, the source point of the heart is Daling pericardium 7. That's the source point of the heart. Why? Because there were no heart points. So Shenmen did not yet exist. Heart 7 did not yet exist in either the Neijing or the Nanjing. So whenever we're treating heart in Dong's acupuncture, we're mainly going through something that has a connection to the pericardium channel somehow, right? So we can see this leg 3 penetrations on the stomach channel goes Yangming to Jue Yin pericardium. Prior to that, you also saw that we use these points, Fire Heart and Fire Master, which are liver 2 and liver 3. And notice that the word Huo, fire, has a direct implication that it has a relationship to heart. This is mediated through the Jue Yin to Jue Yin relationship. So the liver Jue Yin, if we take it from the perspective of regular conventional channels, Jue Yin liver goes to Jue Yin pericardium, also getting us into the realm of heart. So these are points that are used frequently to treat and regulate heart, cardiac function, etc. So in our atrial fibrillation patients, these points are commonly used with points like pericardium 7, so we can actually use both the Yangming and Zhuiyin channels together. Now this here, the leg for horses or the leg team of horses, the Sima, this is the main Dama group for lung, okay? So this is comprised of 8.17, 18, and 19. These, interestingly enough, are also along the stomach channel, and this is the main Dama group for lung. However, you should notice, though, that even though here, with this case, we're treating both heart and lung, where's the lung, right? So this gets us into this next idea of how do we treat based on principles that allow us flexibility in treatment. And one of the things I will tell you is that, you know, some people, when they look at like medical classics like the Neijing and the Nanjing, they think, oh, it's, you know, it's old, it's stuffy. They have all these different ideas that you may or may not be useful in modern clinical practice. But I will tell you, once you understand the principles that are expressed in these classical texts, it becomes really, to some extent, one of the most flexible systems possible, because it allows us to look at all the different myriad ways that we can attack any specific given condition. So one of the things I'll tell us is that as we mature as practitioners, we need to eventually move beyond the simple understanding of basic associations as the only way that we treat things. So yes, grief and loss goes with lungs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to automatically needle the lung channel, or in Tung's acupuncture, the lung Dama group, directly. We can treat this taking into consideration everything as a whole. So if we have both heart and lung, we don't have to say, okay, these are some points for heart, these are some points for lung, these are some points if she has neck pain, these are some, right? This is the low-level physician. And I'm certainly not the high-level physician, right? I aspire, I think I may be sort of high or low medium, somewhere in there. I aspire to be the high-level physician, but the high-level physician is able to look at all of the interconnectedness and come up with a point prescription that deals with everything simultaneously. So let's look at this next point here. This is the upper four flowers, the Sihua Shang, which is, again, over 7708, overlaps stomach 36. Let's take a look. So notice, first of all, that in Tung's acupuncture, this is given the reaction areas of lung and heart, which means that the way that Master Tung conceived of his system, this point had an especially good effect at treating lung and heart. If we look at the indications, we see lung indications, asthma. We certainly see heart indications, coronary artery disease, but we see digestive indications as well, vomiting, sudden turmoil. So sudden turmoil is it's like vomiting and diarrhea simultaneously. Think stomach flu type of things. Okay, so we see all sorts of things at play. And what we need to think of is, when we're looking at Tung's acupuncture in particular, and this is how a lot of Neijing and Nanjing treatment strategies are applied through Tung's system, we need to think to ourselves, now, what's the 5-phase relationship that we're seeing here? That's going to allow us to understand why certain points are doing what they're doing and how to use them in a very broad and flexible way. So let's take a look at, so this is, even if you don't read Chinese, don't worry about it. This is the 5 phases, right? So this is water, wood, fire, soil, or earth. I don't like using the word earth because it's not really the word earth, it's the word soil. And metal. Around here is the engendering cycle, and of course in here we have the control cycle. Okay, everyone knows this. This is basic Chinese medicine. So let's look at how the Neijing, or sorry, now the Nanjing. This is the 69th difficulty. This is the difficulty that gives us the basic rules of supplementing and draining according to the 5 phases. So it says, in vacuity, supplement the mother. In repletion, drain the child. First supplement, then afterwards drain. Now we know this has to do with the 5 phases because later on in the Nanjing, it gives us the specific example of how do we choose points based on this model, and it's entirely a 5-phase model. The main thrust of the Nanjing is to re-envision medicine very purely through the lens of yin yang and 5 phases as the primary methods of understanding diagnosis, treatment, point selection, etc. Right? So this means that in vacuity supplement the mother means we go to in the engendering cycle, the mother which engenders whatever we're dealing with. So for example, if we have, so let's go back and take a look at this real quick, and you can type the answer into the chat room in a second. So in this initial case study, we saw the Tsun position in the right was weak, which means which of the 5 viscera was weak, right? Type it into the room. You can throw your answers in. So right Tsun means which of the 5 viscera is in a state of weakness. Lung, right? Pretty straightforward, right? Lung is here, that piece of the puzzle which relates to the grief or the expression of grief. Now, when the Nanjing says in vacuity supplement the mother, if lung is weak, if metal then is weak, who do we apply supplementation to strengthen lung? Right, we go to soil earth, okay? So if we're looking at Sihua Shang says, Master Dong says it treats asthma. So where's the lung? This is the lung. And why is this the lung? It's because we know that here, treating stomach 36 is the soil point or the earth point on the stomach earth soil channel, earth on earth. So when we want to strengthen metal, then we can apply treatment to stomach 36. One of the reasons why stomach 36 is so good, even in TCM, at supplementing ladder heaven qi. Ladder heaven qi, Hou Tian qi. Ladder heaven qi comes from the combined effort of spleen, stomach, and lungs. Stomach 36 does both of these without us ever having to touch the lung channel, because by strengthening soil earth, strengthening spleen and stomach, that stimulus automatically strengthens lung when it's in a state of vacuity. Now, the other thing that the stomach channel does is if we have, for example, a state of blood stasis in the heart. Okay, so we had atrial fibrillations. The formula I have this patient on is a version of Shui Fuji Yutang, right? So it's a blood stasis moving formula that makes her feel really good. So it's a state of, she has both blood vacuity and blood stasis, if we want to be specific about it. But if we have a state of repletion in the heart in the form of blood stasis, then earth also serves as child. So again, I don't want to go into vaccinations. This patient had atrial fibrillation pre-existing any vaccination status. So it has nothing to do with that, I promise you. Okay, this is this patient. Okay, everyone get the idea? So earth here now has the dual function of being able to supplement lung, but at the same time drain heart so as to relieve stasis. Get the idea? And if, interestingly enough, if we look at stomach 36, this is stomach 36 from TCM texts, right? This is taken right out of Deadman. It treats mania, depression, manic singing, raving. So lots of psychoemotional indications for stomach. Anger and fright, tendency to sadness. Outrageous laughter, agitation with heat in the body. What are the 5-phase relationships at play here? The 5-phase relationships at play here are both, we can see repletion of heart, so manic singing, raving, abusive talk, anger, agitation with heat in the body. This is fire, right? Here, earth, soil as the child can drain fire. But then it says tendency to sadness. This is weakness in metal. So stomach 36 treats not only spleen, stomach, right? There are plenty of spleen stomach indications, but by virtue of the 5-phase relationships, we can deal with other organ systems at the same time, right? So we don't, if we have a specific emotional presentation, it doesn't mean we automatically have to go directly to that one organ system, right? Let's also think about this a little bit more broadly in terms of these 5 phases. What is, if we look at, so in this case, so Barry's asking about fire scorching earth and therefore weakening metal. In this case, it wasn't, in her case, that can happen. In this patient's case, it was more of a blood stasis, not a heat pattern, right? So she really didn't have, she overall is more cold. So in this case, we're using earth to drain the stasis. Keep in mind that acupuncture by itself, in my opinion, is homeostatic in function, which means cooling and heating. We do cooling and heating, in my opinion, more with things like moxa, bloodletting, and herbal medicine. Fine needle acupuncture can sort of do both. All right, before we get there, let's also think about how else can we look at the relationship between earth and grief, or soil and grief? If we look at the Neijing chapter 39 is the chapter on the various different types of pain. And in Neijing chapter 39, it says, 悲则气少, which means in a state of, 悲 is sadness. It has a dispersing function on the qi. Right? So in chapter 39 of the Suen, it basically describes all of the different emotions as vectors of qi movement. Let me give you some examples. Right, so it says when one is angry, the qi goes up, rises. When one is joyous, the qi relaxes. When one is sad, the qi dissipates or scatters. 悲则气消, qi xiao, the scatters, goes in all sorts of different directions. In fear, the qi descends, goes downwards. In frightened, the qi is in a state of disorder. Okay, and so it gives us different movements of qi based on affect patterns. So what is earth about? What is soil about? That is something potentially we can think of as a way to treat this dissipation of the qi, which is characterized by sadness. So earth, one of the things that earth does, we think about the functions of earth. One of the very important functions of earth soil is its holding function, right? So we say, for example, that soil, the spleen, holds the blood in the vessels, right? It also holds the qi in its normal circulation patterns, which is why earth is thought of as center, right? Earth is not, so we frequently, and if those of you who've taken any of my lectures know, we talk about birth, growth, harvesting, and storage, right? So the 5 phases, wood is birth, coming up and out. Fire is the greatest expanse. Earth is the downward, inward movement. And water is hibernation, right? And then earth is the harmonizing phase that holds things together. If sadness, according to the Neijing, is qi xiao, qi in a state of dispersion, then earth is something that can hold. So one of the other reasons we can use earth to treat this pathology of lung is because if sadness causes qi to scatter, by strengthening earth, bringing earth in, that allows us to actually hold on to qi, which would normally be dispersed. Okay, so again, when we're looking at the emotions, we can't go into practice thinking just fear, kidney, anger, liver, and that's it. We have to look at what are the 5-phase relationships, what are the different organs potentially at play, and what movement of qi is created when we have a movement of mind affect in the body. Does that make sense to everyone? So that's a description of why we use those particular points in this patient. We can also see that in general, stomach channel is commonly used for all sorts of psycho-emotional problems. So this is from Ling Shu chapter 10. This is one of the things stomach channel does. It treats aversion to others and fire. Patients are fearful and startled when hearing sounds of wood. We don't have time today to discuss sounds of wood. If you want to join me in New York City for dim sum, when we can have dim sum in person again, we can talk about sounds of wood. The heart moves. The patient wants to be alone inside enclosed spaces. This one I like. I call this the Julie Andrews nightmare. Patients want to climb up high places and sing or throw off their clothes and run away. It's Julie Andrews because it's Sound of Music and Victor Victoria. She runs up high mountains, and in Victor Victoria, she takes her clothes off. So that's, sorry, I was trained as a I have an undergraduate degree in music, so it's the musician in me that likes to make these associations. My apologies if you don't get any of the references. And notice even other points of the stomach channel. Futu, stomach 32, treats mania and ghost talk. So we have psycho-emotional indications. And Futu is pretty darn close to Tongguan, which is the point that we use for heart in Dong's acupuncture. Notice also that Master Dong basically told us that stomach 32 is pretty darn close to Tongguan because he specifically said, I use stomach 32 when I treat palpitations and heart disease. Okay. All right, so that's this first case. Let's take a look at one other case. So one of the other things to keep in mind is that these 5-phase relationships do become very important. This is something that we can just mention very briefly here because we'll talk about this over the weekend as well. So when we're using Daoma point combinations in Dong's acupuncture, frequently we use them with these 5-phase ideas. For example, the lower 3 emperors, the Sha San Huang, which is Tian Huang, Heavenly Emperor, Earth Emperor, and Human Emperor. These are a kidney Daoma group, but we use them frequently for liver vacuity or in general for blood vacuity patterns, right? Why? So for example, right after a woman is done menstruating, when she's in a state of relative blood vacuity. So we can use Dong's acupuncture for those of you who are fond of the menstrual cycle 4-stage treatment planning. We do Dong's acupuncture for 4-stage treatment during the menstrual cycle. In the follicular phase, right after the bleeding is stopped, when the woman is in a state of relative blood vacuity, we can use one of the point groups we use commonly is the lower 3 emperors. Why? Because kidney is obviously useful here, but we use kidney as the water, as the mother of wood to strengthen liver and liver's ability to hold onto blood and to build blood. Right? That's a 5-phase mother-child relationship we see in Dong's acupuncture all the time. The Sima points, the 4 horses, or the team of horses, which is again the main lung Daoma group in Dong's acupuncture. Notice that Master Dong says used for tinnitus. What's the relationship between lung and tinnitus? Lung metal is the mother of kidney water, which is why the supplementation point on the kidney channel is the Jing River metal point, kidney 7. So we can use the Sima points to treat tinnitus. I have a patient I'm treating now for, and I know we said we wouldn't talk about, at my preference, vaccines and COVID, but I have a patient that I'm treating now for post-vaccination tinnitus, where we're using the Sima points as the main group, and it's like in 3 treatments, it's almost already gone, right? One of the rare times I would say tinnitus is possibly easy to treat. Okay, but here we have the association of metal as mother of kidney water. So Sima points are indicated for tinnitus. We saw the Huoying and the Huoju, these are on the liver channel. So we have liver and heart as a 5-phase relationship. And we also use the Sihua points, which are along the stomach channel for blood stasis. We do bloodletting. This is an example of draining the child with the idea of treating things like heart blood stasis. So these 5-phase relationships we see all the time within Dong's acupuncture as well. And this we'll explore over the weekend as part of the Neijing Nanjing lecture. Second case study. This is a 40s male waking through the night taking Ativan. He has anxiety, but what he's been complaining of, he's been waking at night with palpitations, a sense of panic. He also experiences fatigue, coldness, slightly dry. His pulse is thin, slippery in the Tsun position, deep and very weak in the Chur positions, right? So keep that in the back of your head. Overall thin, but slippery in the Tsun positions and deep and weak in the Chur positions. The treatment points are large intestine 11, kidney gate, 7-7-18 is Shenguan is kidney gate, and the left leg or foot 3 fires. And then he's on the Calm ZZZ, which is a Swanza Rentang formula from Evergreen, which I use in my practice actually. I mostly do custom formulas in my practice, to be honest. But this one I like, it's an easy one and it works really, really well. So we can see that in general here, the basic idea is that he has a state of vacuity, in particular blood vacuity. So the model that I'm working on is he has a vacuity pattern related to blood, related to liver, related to kidney. We can see that especially in the Chur positions being weak. But the slipperiness in the Sun position with this waking with panic has to do with repletion and fire in the heart center. Okay. So here, of course, this is the basic idea of the 5 phases. This is, and those of you who've taken my classes before have seen this diagram over and over again. This is the idea of birth, where's my cursor? Birth, growth, harvesting, and storage. So here, what we're seeing is this is wood, fire, autumn coming down and in, and then winter is this aspect of storage. So what's happening here is that there's an insufficiency in kidney and liver to get the storage function to happen. But at the same time, we have too much heat up in summer, up in heart, that does not allow us to go into storage. Or once we go into storage, in other words, once we go into sleep, that heat basically causes him to startle, wake with palpitations and a sense of panic. That's the basic idea of what's happening in this specific case. So the points here again, notice we're using large intestine 11. Large intestine 11, of course, is, I'm not using it because it clears heat. I'm using it because it has a inward and basically downward, inward, and moving function on the liver in particular. Notice both large intestine 11 and kidney gate. Kidney gate is a version of spleen 9, of the yin mound spring spleen 9. Both of those are he points. He means to come in, right? It's not he si. Si is a very, very liberal translation of the word. It's a he uniting point. The word he means to come together and to unite. So one of the things those points do is they put the patient in a state of storage and inward movement. In particular, large intestine 11 is the soil or earth point on the large intestine channel, which means it strengthens large intestine, which means it strengthens metal, which means that metal is moving down and in. Metal also controls wood, so it puts wood into a state of downward and inward motion, which is why large intestine 11 treats liver rising as well, because it basically uses the downward and inward movement of metal to control that upward movement, which is characteristic of wood going into fire. Okay, so it puts him into that state of storage, which will then eventually help the sleep function. So Shenguan, for example, in Tung's acupuncture, is a very commonly used point for things like insomnia, because it works on repairing that kidney's ability to bring things down into a state of storage and consolidation. Now, what we have next is the Zu Sanhuo, the leg or the foot 3 fires. And this treats the heart component of the case, which is this sort of heart fire, the slippery Sun position. So we base this on the pulse. The pulse is showing us vacuity, especially weakness in the yin kidney, not yin as in yin like TCM yin. Yin is in going into the state of storage yin. That's broken. We can feel that in the pulse. So we needle points like large intestine 11 and Shenguan. But we see that Sun repletion, right, in the heart, we have to address that as well. So the leg 3 or the foot 3 fires is comprised of 6, 6, 10, 11, and 12. 10 is overlapping spleen 3. You can see here, Master Tung says it treats palpitations, treats problems of the head in general. We can summarize it, says that it clears and drains heart fire. We'll talk about why in a second. 6611 overlaps spleen 4. And you'll see all sorts of heart indications here. It says palpitations, hypertension, heart disease. And then, of course, the last one, Huosan, is overlapping kidney 2. Now, in the Taiwanese literature, and I'll talk about this on Saturday during the Neijing Nanjing class, there is a suggestion by some of the authors in Taiwan that these points, these 3, the fire chrysanthemum, fire scatter, and fire lotus, right? Fire chrysanthemum and fire lotus, These are not exactly spleen 3, spleen 4, kidney 2. They're slightly different. And the proof they give is that these points are used basically to, so the foot 3 fires is commonly used to treat repletion heat fire going up to the head. Foot goes to head. These points treat all sorts of things like dizziness, blurry vision. Think of them as basically descending fire, right? Which is why they're called the 3 fires. And this, some of the writing in Taiwan says, look, spleen 4, spleen 3, they're spleen points. We don't use these in Dong's acupuncture primarily for spleen stomach stuff. We use it for heart head stuff. And I will say that this is a complete misreading of Chinese medicine at a fundamental level. Why? Because remember that spleen, stomach, earth phase, soil phase, is the child of fire, which is why precisely they can be used to drain conditions of fire repletion, such as heart fire. Okay. I'm going to talk about this wonderful Qing Dynasty text that was recently translated into English. I have no promotional anything paid to me. The title is Explanations of the Channels and Points. It's by Yue Hanjun. It's translated by Michael Brown and done by Purple Cloud Press. It's a wonderful text because what it does is it goes into points and discusses all of the intricate 5-phase relationships. And there it goes through and looks specifically at how, for example, spleen 3 and spleen 4 are classically indicated, even if you open up any basic TCM text, to treat all sorts of problems related to things like heart fire, right? So here we can see that these points do indeed overlap spleen 3 and spleen 4, because spleen 3 and spleen 4 are, as spleen 3 is the earth point on earth channel, like stomach 36 was earth point on earth channel. It has an ability, and foot goes to head. It has a very strong ability to clear fire going up into the head, especially when it's related to heart, right? So this is explanations of the channels and points translated by Michael Brown. Yue Hanjun is the author. Okay. And the last point here, of course, that's important, this one, fire scatter, is overlapping kidney 2. Kidney 2 is the fire point on the kidney channel, which means it mediates the relationship. It basically communicates heart and kidney. So it has this ability to take, if there's empty heat, repletion heat of heart, and bring it down and consolidate it back into kidney. So this patient then, that's how we treat it. So we have points that address bringing things down into a state of consolidation, right? Large intestine 11, Shenguan bring things down and in. They have a strengthening effect on kidney. Shenguan will also strengthen liver and liver blood, because kidney is the mother of, so water is the mother of wood. And then we use the foot 3 fires to treat this repletion, which is sort of like the branch pattern. It's not the main issue, but we have to address it anyway. And this sort of point prescription not only basically is getting him sleeping better at night, but it's gotten him off of the prescription medication. Okay. I think that's pretty much, I don't want to go over too much. If we have, so references you can see here, I believe you probably get the PowerPoint questions before we adjourn for the day. Anything in particular? I think basically we got through the introduction I wanted to get through. Okay. So again, this is the basic idea that we're going to be going over this coming weekend.
All right, guys, thank you so much for attending.
Oop. All right, so I think we lost Donna wherever she was. I don't know if we had any further words from our sponsors before we end. But again, that's all I wanted to cover for today. Hopefully we'll see some of you over the weekend, and hopefully some of you that I know on the talk. We'll see you again in New York City for dim sum when we can all meet comfortably for dim sum again. And I don't know if there are any other words from our sponsors, but we'll give another minute or two, and then otherwise there you are, you're back.
All right, guys, thank you so much for attending today's class. Today's webinar has been recorded. So if you would like to watch it again, you can log into your eLotus account and find it on our TCM Wisdom Tube tomorrow afternoon. And remember, we are looking forward to seeing you this weekend at Henry's 2-day weekend webinar. On Saturday, we're going to find out how classic acupuncture, Neijing and Nanjing relates to Master Dong's acupuncture. And then on Sunday, we're going to be focusing on mental health and emotions. So we hope to see you guys there. And it's going to be our last weekend of 2021. I'm sorry. You see, the pandemic has really gotten to me, and I don't know what year I am at all. But anyways, I do hope I see you guys this weekend. So I'll see you then. Have a great day. And again, we'll see you this weekend. Bye.